record. All right. And I'm hoping John will join us because I have a question for him specifically, but if not, we'll talk about other things. Christina is out today, so I don't think we have any specimen cross-mapping terms to review unless Amy, you have something.
No, I don't have anything for today.
Okay. So I did not do my action items. We have this lab test as procedures orderables here, and I'm not sure, did we want to keep, do we need to keep working on it? Um, or,
So did Alyssa a attend last week, right?
yes, she
Yeah.
did. She did.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's so did she have any case studies that she thought would be useful?
Yeah, she mentioned several. I can pull up the notes from last call.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry I missed that. I had like
Yeah,
at the
no,
last minute
yeah.
She might attend in the future too. So, I mean, but she had
yeah,
some conflicts, or she might be on the second half of this call. If I,
okay.
she has some other meetings and sometimes they overlap. So,
Well, she's
Yeah, so
okay.
she sent this one as a WHO supported article around specimen handling for patient safety. It's old, but it's she said it's an oldie but goodie.
Yeah.
And she was talking about, understanding specimen handling between collection and receipt. Um, and yeah, you wouldn't, the conformatory testing on the same specimen, you have to have the date test performed to differentiate the two because the collection date's the same. Any
Right.
retests, reruns.
Oh, and then if what about add-ons? Like we used to get calls all the time. They'd
Mhm,
ordered some tests on a particular blood type, and then they would call up and they'd want to add tests to it. I
mhm.
would think that would be the same thing. You'd have to know exactly which specimen.
um, well, that's
Yeah,
interesting too because um, I think what Ricky's saying is if you're using the same specimen for like screening and confirmatory, it will be the
Right.
test date and time that will differentiate, which test was performed at which time on, whether it's the same specimen or, potentially different specimens. For your point, um, we would go look up for add-ons too if we had any, serum plasma. Usually, sometimes that would be pulling a CBC tube if they want to add on something like an A1C or BNP that you could spin down. Um, in those cases, you would have the original specimen collection date and time. It was already in the lab. Um, so when you received it, you kind of like when you do the add-on. But if you have two tubes of serum or plasma that were both, collected at the same time and you combine them into the same aliquot tube, it wouldn't be specific to which tube per se, if you will. It would be, we have this specimen in the lab. We have enough to do the add-on test. We'll combine the tubes, um, or pull the serum or the plasma off of the original tubes and then put it in aliquot, label it with the new add-on order, and then perform the testing.
Right. But what I guess I'm saying is, what if you have, an early morning specimen and you have a mid-morning specimen or an afternoon specimen all in the same day? Don't you need to know exactly which one if you're going to do
Mhm.
an add-on test?
Yeah, but
Usually you will
we
pull from the first one the date and time of collection. I mean, if you have the information that's available. But yeah, and theoretically you have to, and then you wouldn't want to combine those either.
Right. So I just wondered if that would be another reason.
But the question is, are you asking about the specimen date and time, like when it was collected, versus the test result date and time when it was performed? Because those are two different things.
No, that's right. So what she was talking about with the WHO was the fact that a confirmatory test has to be done based on the result, and so you need to put them together.
She was talking about when you're um, reusing the same specimen and testing it a second time. For example, for convalescent serology testing, when you have the
Right,
first sample and then you're getting a
right,
second sample, but when the
right,
second sample comes in, you're pulling the first sample and retesting it.
right. Okay,
You wouldn't be able to differentiate that without the test perform time.
okay.
Yeah, and I didn't hear her mention that type of example because that's another use case I know we've talked about on this call. But I think, it was just more the screening confirmatory. And I think we
Yes,
were talking
screening and confirmatory. So two different test methods
toxicology,
used on the same
right?
sample.
Like toxicology.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'm still not getting it, but that's all right. You have the same sample, you have two different test methods,
So
Yeah.
you do
and
screening tests, like you do a drug screen, a drugs of abuse on urine from the ER.
right,
Because I used to do these, and then the community hospital I was at didn't have toxicology like on site to
right,
do
right.
the confirmatory. So we'd send it off to med tox across town at reference lab. When I was at Duke, we could do those on site. And so, but basically you would have a separate order because those are separate results, but you use the same specimen. Sometimes it would reflex, and sometimes, it might be something like a clinician that says, hey, I want to add this on. It's not any different to like a urinalysis with a culture, whether it's a reflex or, you add on, say, hey, do you still have the specimen? Can we add a culture onto that for the patient?
Okay, yeah, and I can see that. I don't know how that's different if they want to add another test, like I was saying.
It,
Um,
it's not.
okay,
So yeah, so basically, Elisa was saying, you use the same sample for the
yeah.
screening and confirmatory, or the original and the reflex, or the
Okay.
add-on, if possible.
So then you said something about needing to know what the lab results were for the confirmatory test. Um,
Well, yeah, you're not going to do a confirmatory on all specimens, right?
right.
Because if you have a negative drugs of abuse screen, it wouldn't make sense to do
No,
confirmatory
it
unless
would
you said it was a false,
no, I'm trying to figure
negative.
out how we make this a use case, I guess. And I'm obviously not understanding how it's a use case. Which is my own fault because I should have attended the meeting. Um,
No,
No, I think her point was, you need to know when these tests were performed.
right.
So we were looking at the performance date and times too.
Okay.
yeah. I mean, anytime you do more than one test on the same specimen, really, it helps to differentiate um, those different results and understand how potentially there could be, a different interpretation or something.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
and the other thing too is like, maybe you have something where you do, I don't know, like say you're in protein electrophoresis, you do your total protein on your chem analyzer. That might be done on day one, when the specimen is drawn, but you might miss the cutoff or it comes in the evening or something like that for doing your electrophoresis testing. And so maybe that's done on day shift the next day. So you might have your total protein entered for that result item, as people call them, fire observation, done at one date and time. But then, your electrophoresis protein, your whatever, you're finding that you're listing out, and then the total report gets done at a later date and time the next day. And that's where the diagnostic report date would come in because the total protein is held basically until and
Hmm.
reported in the final report. even though it was done on a different date and time. That might be a good example, I guess.
Hmm.
Um,
Not sure the clinician actually pays attention to that, though.
right. No, fair enough. I would probably agree. They're just looking at when are the results available and then
Right.
what are they, right? For their decision making.
Yeah. Okay. So, but I do think we have a couple of things, that we can send back and support at asking them ONC to add test perform date time.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, I see John has joined. John, I had this. I know I emailed you, but I had this. They're not quite happy with with the explanation. So I just wanted to double check to see. Um, I'm assuming we probably have to put it into our APHL extensions when if we can't somehow get this unable to further serotype. Um,
So I guess I'm confused. What am I misunderstanding from the email, or was my response correct?
well, yeah, I think I still um so let me back up and get everybody on the same page. So
Yep,
so
yep.
we got a request or we got an ask we said from a lab, public health or Oregon Public Health Lab. They say they have a result that's called Shiga produced in E. coli non 0157 unable to further serotype. And um, they don't have it. There is no SNOMED code that's that specific. Um, and so the way they getting to this result, this is an overall conclusion after they do a latex agglutination to see that it's non 0157. And then they do a PCR to see that it's Shiga toxin producing. And then they were going to do serotyping to find which of the O antigens are present. But the negative control doesn't work. So you can't actually determine the O antigen at all. And so there was at one point a SNOMED code. Let me pull up my email to you. Um, where is it? Um, there was at one point a concept that said "oh non-typable," which again isn't exactly what they want, but it's deprecated now because and it's mapped to just O, serogroup O. Um, and I'm not sure that that's correct, right? And here's what you had said.
Right. And my understanding is that if they can say that it's serogroup O non-typable, they've still identified that it is serogroup O, but they can't make a more detailed determination of O1
I'm
or
not,
O100.
see, I'm not
So the
sure that
appropriate,
that's true
but
necessarily.
well, if it's not true from the lab, it's true from a SNOMED concept perspective because the FFSN is stating that it's serogroup O, not
No, it's
typable. So from
serogroup
a
O not typable. It's not
right,
serogroup O not further typable. It's serogroup O not typable.
but in order
So
for it
you
to be
couldn't
serogroup,
type serogroup O,
but
but
in order to say serogroup O not typable, you have to at least know that it's serogroup O. Otherwise, you would have to say that it's just E. coli without a serogroup. That's my point.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So from that perspective, yes, serogroup O, Escherichia coli, is the correct concept to point
Mm,
at from the inactivation perspective. Unless and that's where I'm getting lost.
mm, yeah. I mean, I don't know that there is any E. coli without an O group at all. I don't know that. I'm not an
Would that be
expert.
the species level? I mean, because then you could say, well, I know I have E. coli, but then I can't go further than that.
Because I mean, we
I
do
don't have the.
have, sorry, Andrea,
Oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
So we do have concepts for E. coli K99, K88, F41. So there are other serogroups.
Yeah, there are other serogroups. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, I don't know enough about that. But
Mhm.
it sounds like from what they're saying they need, which is the non-O157, unable to further serotype. There is a code for that, but they didn't like that one either because there is an E. coli non-017, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and from a SNOMED perspective, that's even difficult because that's a negation concept, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's do. Hello. Um,
Mhm. Well, some
oh,
from what I'm
sorry.
seeing,
Oh.
it's non-motile is the only non-value associated with 0157. So we're not actually saying non-O. Oh, there it
Well,
is.
we are.
So it's using
We are.
non.
Here we go. Yeah, here we are. There is this one. I mean, from a SNOMED perspective, that would be the right
Ooh.
concept
Oh,
to
that's
map
interesting. I
to.
haven't seen that, but I think from a clinical perspective, that's something that a lot of labs will say, I have staph aureus, but not MRSA because people want to know for treatment, whether something's, resistant
Right.
or clinically, and like this one is 0157
Mhm.
is.
Oh, here we go. This is actually, well, this one is entero. So what they also need a Shiga tox. They are also need the Shiga toxin in there.
Yeah, if they did that testing.
Shiga toxin producing here. This is the
So back up to what concept is they actually need in the email?
they need Shiga toxin producing E. coli, non-O157, unable to further serotype.
Escherichia coli. So that's hmm. I could put that in the US extension
Well, I
because
wonder if we have something similar already.
But isn't the parent there the Shiga toxin producing E. coli?
Yeah, we have this as the enterohemorrhagic. E. coli, but I don't know that. I I don't know that that's always the case, right?
Well, but you can't click the one above saying Shiga toxin producing E. coli organism.
Yeah, but we know more than that. We know it's not 0157.
Right. So
Oh,
then the parentage would be Shigatoxa producing Escherichia coli and Escherichia coli not 0157, which I don't
Right.
think we have a concept for that. But I'm okay with adding that to the US extension um, if we want to make a submission.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, let me
but I
double
don't want
check
to.
that that
Yeah,
the enterohemorrhagic doesn't cover it.
Okay. Yep.
that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because that's the one thing from a clinical perspective that I don't know if every Shiga toxin producing E. coli is also an enterohemorrhagic E. coli. If that's the case, then I would use that one. But if that's not the case, if you can have Shiga toxin producing E. coli that's not enterohemorrhagic, then we need that other term.
Yeah, but we still, even if we can use that concept needs to be remodeled to
Hmm.
also be to have a parentage of Escherichia coli, not 0157. Because
Yeah.
I have to think because when you get into negation, it inverts the hierarchy. So
Mm.
is that a valid is a parent? I need to think about that. Um, that one I might need to run past Jim Case just to make sure that I have the inversion correct.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, but this one has the H7.
yeah, and you just need the 0157 without.
Yeah, without the H7, because I'm not sure that they
Okay,
tested the H.
okay. If you can check on the entero
Yeah.
hemorrhagic part,
Hmm.
and then make a determination what the FSN should be. I can go ahead and add that to the US extension. That's fine. I just don't want to get into adding that non-typable one back.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I get that.
This is
so
a
yeah.
this is a good example though, like where you have different combinations of positive, negative, if you will, lab tests that are part of the organism identification, no matter what the organism is. I mean, obviously not all of them require this. Um, and then how it plays into
The
how it's
final.
recorded and
Mhm.
encoded. Um, and obviously, for organisms, usually you want to know, what the single organism with the single code is. Is it something, and I mean, this kind of gets into lab tests when you look at, different, we've been having a lot of discussion, John, about
Mhm.
with Loink, like there's so much thrown into the method axes because there's all these different aspects about the
Mhm.
meaning of the lab test. Um, the tests are done separately, but you're trying to combine them all for the organism. Are they, where I see this getting into a sticky area is like Ricky was trying to look for this under the parent and putting it under a single hierarchy, and the more information you have, the harder it gets, right? Because you're going to have different
Mhm.
combinations. This is positive, that's
Hmm.
negative. Is that the same as the flip side of the same thing is negative, but the other part, something else is positive, and how does it fit into that hierarchy? I mean, are you going to get to a point where you might not be able to fit it into the hierarchy is kind of my question. And then is there a need to do something like a post-coordinated approach or some other way to kind of split out the pieces of information and combine them together either, in another way?
Right. So I guess my question is what link code would be used to encode the test for this? Because
I will ask them that
um,
too. Yeah.
yeah, because
So
I was assuming that this would be a culture result.
So the top
Um,
level, yeah, you're absolutely right. It'd be like some type of culture. You grow an organism, you go to identify it. You might,
mhm,
let's just say, the first thing you do is a gram stain. So, you're going to say, I think E. coli is gram negative. So, you have grams. So you won't
Yeah, but
know
they,
specifically. Then you start going down, the workflow and adding on these tests to identify, okay, I have a gram negative organism, and then you go down and like
mhm,
Ricky said, maybe you're doing PCR based tests, you might be doing the antigen antibody. Here we have the Shiga toxin. So there's a Shiga toxin test,
mhm,
and
mhm,
then is it positive or negative? Well,
mhm,
depending, that's pretty straightforward. That's
mhm.
that's another reflex order that gets added on, and so it's separate, but it applies to the organism. So whatever organism you have is a Shiga toxin producing if it's positive, if you will. So that's where you start to get in. There's separate link codes for these because they're separate orders and results. But it's all the
R-
combination of these pieces of information that go together to identify
Mhm.
kind
I
of
don't know
the
what I'm going to
subtype of
ask them
organism.
what they're using.
I think you
Right, but
can do Shiga toxin or Shiga. There's 164,136 halfway
Maybe
up.
this one.
Yeah, if it's an isolate, there's one on stool too that's further down too for the 64136 or one six
right,
four one
but
three six. But sorry, go ahead, John.
here's my issue with this, I guess, and this is just my ignorance speaking. All of our components here are in the affirmative. We're looking or determining what's present. In SNOMED, we've made an assertion of negation in the organism hierarchy to say that it's all these other versions of E. coli, just not this one. And to me, that's a finding of what was isolated, not an organism, if that makes sense.
So organisms are what is isolated. So I'm not
Right, but when you
getting
say
how
that
they're
it's
separate.
not ice, when you make a statement in SNOMED about what was not isolated, that's actually in the clinical findings hierarchy, not in the organisms hierarchy.
Yeah,
Right.
we don't use clinical findings in the lab. That's more from a clinician perspective. Is that what you're trying to highlight?
Well, no, your result value for the link code would be a finding, not in if it's an organism specific test
So we
that
don't use in the laboratory the findings hierarchy out of SNOMED. So
Yeah,
it may
which
be
I mean,
true. It's more the physician interpretation, and they list that on the problem list, like, you know, so that's why I say it's like or EHR functionality with SNOMED and what when the physician's role on what they.
well, if we're not using it in the lab, then why do we have all the not isolated finding codes for organisms in SNOMED?
because there's people that
Bec
do use it. It's yeah,
right.
it's
So you've
Yeah.
got the specimen no bacteria isolated finding is an entire sub-hierarchy in SNOMED that has all these listed of what was not isolated.
hmm
And I think Ricky's highlighting that might be the public health labs use that in their
Okay.
link system, but from an LIS perspective, I haven't encountered folks that are using the findings hierarchy. It's not part of, how things are, necessarily reported. From a
Hmm.
free text, they might also include the same phrasing. I'll say that, but it's like
Hmm.
the findings hierarchy is not used in laboratory LISs. It's more on the physician side of things. From
Okay.
so a great example is like, okay, lab will report out their triglyceride level or their cholesterol level. So it'll be cholesterol, and then you'll have the numeric. The physician on their side will say, oh, this patient has hypercholesterolemia, and they'll pull it from the findings hierarchy. They'll put it on the problem list in that part of the functionality on the EHR. And that's kind of the distinction. We don't make that clinical assessment, if you will, because we're not clinicians in the laboratory from the sense of a physician diagnosing a patient.
Yeah,
you
but
would they would have to.
I, I'm agreeing to kind of disagree on this one, Andrea. Because it's just simply because when you have an organism specific culture and you have a value of not isolated,
Yeah,
then that
but this is
is
yeah, but
Thanks for bringing these
this
up,
is a
Ricky.
in this case they are looking for E. coli. They found E. coli, but it's not this particular one. So it's
Right.
different than Shiga toxin producing E. coli not isolated because they did isolate a Shiga toxin producing one. It's just not, but the only thing they know about it is that it's not 0157. So to say E. coli, this one not isolated would also
Mhm.
not be good enough because they did isolate E. coli. It's just not this one.
Right.
Right,
Right.
right. Um, I'm just yeah, it's okay. I understand what you're saying. The not isolated part is a in the LIS is a status assigned to the organism that was identified in the culture, I'm assuming, is how the LIS represents it, not as a clinical finding where it's pre-coordinated.
Yeah, I
Is
mean
that correct?
these like this one, Salmonella, Shigella,
Hmm.
Campylobacter, and E. coli is kind of when something grows, but it's none of these, which are the pathogens they're looking for, right? So
Hmm.
that's why these are in here, is for those
Right.
kind of statements where you're, the other way to say it is, you know,
Mhm.
um, potentially no growth if nothing grew, or something else, and then you have a note saying this, this test looks for and lists all the ones,
Right.
but notes are
Because when
not
I
codifiable. So
Can you repeat the
uh,
first part that you just said before Ricky chimed in? I
sure.
agree with the
So
second half, but I didn't quite get everything to know about the first
I
half.
guess here's what I'm struggling with is when I
Yeah.
did the microbiology data model at Geisinger 10 years ago, we were getting text strings back from SunQuest into Epic that specifically stated E. coli not isolated or X
mhm,
organism not isolated.
Hmm.
right.
So my question is in from the LIS side, is that a pre-coordinated representation that in the LIS is actually the organism with a status of not isolated in two different data fields?
No.
Mm-hmm.
So typically what happens historically, and Nancy, you probably can chime in on examples too, is if they're ordering culture and they identify E. coli, um, or sometimes the physician might indicate why they're ordering the culture, suspected E. coli, infection if they do due to that point. Um, there are a lot of free text strings that are built in Epic and other EHRs and the LISs that are just free text strings. It'll say, XYZ not grown or identified or isolated, depending on the type of testing that's performed. It's just free text. It's whatever the laboratory decides to phrase it and put it in there. And that's one of the things for Shield. I would love to get those like from Epic so we can start to look at these and can we start to organize them, maybe rephrase better to coordinate with encoding it at a future point. But basically, these are just free text fields that people are putting in. There's no modeling, there's no positive, negative, no qualifier values, nothing like that with the.
Yeah, the
But it's great
LIS
that
is
the
way behind in terms of data modeling these kind of
it's not an
things.
LIS issue, it's more how the laboratory practice has been. I mean, they could potentially set it up. The other thing that I think is a major issue is historically there's multiple vendors that they consider as you're going through this isolation identification of the organism and you're adding on these tests, they don't model them as the same as other tests. This occurs in micro and blood bank,
Hmm.
and they consider them, quote, workflow steps. So when
Mm,
you're adding these on, like you're doing a Shiga test or you're doing, a catalase and it's catalase positive or negative, there's the catalase or I mean catalase is super simple. It's kind of historic, but you add it on and what happens is it puts up a field in the LIS under the culture as you're doing your workup. And pathology is kind of like this too, as you're adding on things. It also allows for additional charges to be dropped potentially if you're doing
Mhm.
a lot of additional testing, or especially in blood bank, if you have to go through, um,
Mhm.
working up a warm agglutinin or some other, type of thing that you find as you're going through the process. They do not have the capacity to add on LOINC codes to these. And I
Mhm.
suspect probably not SNOMED codes for qualifier values, even though these are similar to other types of lab tests, like if they would be ordered separately, like a PCR test or something like that,
Okay.
which I absolutely hate and I think we need to address at a point,
Well,
but I'll pause there.
but specific to the culture results where we're making a statement of not isolated, the culture result that's getting returned from the LIS to the EHR is that text string that states X organism not isolated.
Hmm.
You have to map that to a clinical finding
Yeah.
in SNOMED for not isolated, because if you map it to the organism, you're
Mm.
making a positive assertion and
Right.
not a negative assertion.
So I think so there's no mapping capability on that is the first point. So
Well,
um
I disagree
so
with
it's
that,
because
but
again
okay.
it's a free no because it's a free text string and maybe so there's a lot of free text strings that are not mappable in LISs because it assumes that field can be mapped to SNOMED and that field is typically not set up. And I think
Right.
Epic has it set up that way too because that's why I wanted to start to look at that. Can we
Hmm.
start to get it so it's mappable. And it's same thing too when we were talking about susceptibility testing. When you start in HL7, I don't know if you were on, um, we had some shield calls. I know Jim Case was on because there was,
Okay.
um, they're like, oh, if you're reporting this in HL7 V2 and you're putting the interpretation like for sensitive resistant intermediate in the, I think it's the OBX8, which is kind of considered the interpretation field. And Rob Hausen was on too because he's like,
Hmm.
well, they're looking at interpretation as that specific field, not that the interpretation can also be an OBX5 if you don't. So the scenario I'm looking at is for CLSI, labs have to report some organisms where they have the susceptibility
Hmm.
numeric result, how many millimeters, in OBX5, and then the interpretation goes on 8, whether it's sensitive, resistant, you know.
Hmm.
In other cases, there's some organisms they can just report out if it's sensitive, resistant, and they don't put in the numeric, so it's just the qualifier value, and then they can map it to SNOMED qualifier values, which is great.
Hmm.
On the first scenario, when it's an OBX8, that field is also free text, and they're using the HL7 table for the SRI, and there's no capability in the LAS currently, as far as I'm aware, that can map that to a SNOMED code. And that's something else that I think the same value
Hmm.
in two different fields, how it's set up, and then how it gets reported in HL7 V2 messaging, and then I think they should be mapped to the same SNOMED code the same way. And it's only half of
Okay.
them that are going to be mapped to the SNOMED code because of that lack of functionality in the LAS. So these are some of the things in Shield we might
Hmm.
want to call out.
Hmm.
When you talk about LIS functionality, what's needed to support some of these things at a very basic level. We'll get a lot of pushback from vendors, I'm sure. I mean, the other thing too that I think so the sensitivity panel, like so the E. coli, let's say we add on a gram negative sensitivity panel. It could be from Biomuria, let's say even, and you have the set of antibiotics you test, and then you know if you're sensitive or resistant or whatever. That panel name, which would normally be for add-on panels, would be an OBX or OBR4. I'm talking about other HL7 calls from the grouping. Um, Almost all the LIS and EHR vendors suppress that from being released outside the LIS. So even if it is encoded, it's not going to get sent to the EHR and downstream entities like public health. I asked Aaron Holt Coyne from Tennessee many moons ago, when we were maybe when we were on the LIC, do you guys want these OBR, these
Hmm.
add-on panels? And she says, absolutely for public
Hmm.
health. Yet, I think historically, I know Epic is one of them. I don't know how many LISs do this, but when they send their HL7 messages out in V2, for ELR or other things, they're only sending the top level OBR4, which is the culture, and not the sub add-on panels and orders. And I think it's a disservice to public health. I think it's also a disservice to the folks in the EHR. So I think that's another thing I would love to change, but that would also take, I think they try to like mirror the report where there's an organism or each isolate, and then they're like these values are like hanging off of it, if you will. But
Mhm.
so I don't know if that helps or hinders.
It, it does. I'm still putting together the result value versus the interpretation and figuring out. I can't remember if that I thought that text string came through as an actual result value, or at least Geisinger had chose to
Yeah.
represent it as a
I'm
result
pretty sure
value,
it comes
which,
through as a result value because
yeah.
that other field, the OBX8, used to be called abnormal flags
Mm,
before it got renamed to interpretation, and it supports multiple repeats, which most systems don't support because that table actually contains multiple different um, aspects of interpretations now.
okay.
Right. So you
Yep.
could, yeah, you can find something susceptible or resistant, but you could also find something expected or not expected. But they don't live in the same type
Yeah.
of, you know,
And I have,
concept domain. So,
yeah, and I have to be careful because my implementation knowledge is almost a decade out of date with what SunQuest and Epic were set up as.
But I don't think they've
So,
really redesigned those processes.
it-
Right,
yeah, I don't
Nancy?
think you,
which,
I think you're less out of date than you think.
Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
that's sad.
Though I've heard from at least two vendors that they're completely redesigning now. So
Oh, interesting.
yeah,
Okay,
so there's that.
cool.
Be interesting to see what they use in design too. But yeah, I think, with those interpretations, if we could get the LIS vendors to support SNMED codes, I mean, that would be a good step forward too. And part of
Yep.
this, like with USCDI, is like how they interpret things and then thus their functionality. And I'll just say,
Right.
I've heard from some vendors, even with some of the link things, John, you probably heard me talk about at the link meeting and stuff, just supporting the long name. When Meaningful Use came out, it wasn't until Loink changed to the 212 character field for all of the Loink fields that once they realized that, they had to put it on their roadmap. But I was on a call with Texas Department of Health with this vendor, with several clients, and they were basically telling Texas, we need to have in the state law where it says you have to use the long name. Otherwise we're not going to support it, basically giving pushback to the Texas Department of Health. And it's like all of us were trying to convince them. And it wasn't until Loink changed the characters that they realized they had to do that. Otherwise their interfaces were going to have issues.
Hmm.
Um,
Mhm.
and and then they got it on their
Yeah.
roadmap. But I mean, from their
Good.
perspective, it's probably if it isn't broke, don't fix it. In other words, it cuts from their revenue if they have to do
Yep.
development. And so I
Hmm.
get that too.
Yep. Yep. So,
Okay.
Ricky, if you let me know what you need on that, I'll put the CRS ticket in and then assign it to you,
Okay. Sounds good.
or assign it to Christine, whoever, or
Christina.
Amy,
Yeah.
which,
Yeah.
yep. Okay.
Christina. Yeah. I still haven't managed to set myself up again. So it's like,
It's
yeah,
all
yeah,
good.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
low
yeah.
priority.
Yeah. It keeps bumping down. Especially
Yep.
since Christina's doing such a great job. I'm like, okay.
Yep. Exactly.
All right. Well, we've got 9 more minutes. I'm not sure. Is there any topics we can tackle in 9 minutes?
You did start with the procedure. Can we go back to that?
Oh yeah. Let's see here.
Since
Where's this?
John's on.
Do we still need this? Yeah. So
Yeah, Andrea, I saw your response about the
You know
order
where I was
ops on the
going.
Link forum.
And
No,
I
it was
also
a perfect response.
Oh,
Well,
I didn't see that one yet. I haven't looked at
okay,
that.
yeah, so I'll give you the context on that. So Carmela,
Let me
so
go
there's
there. Hang on. Where
yeah.
I think I have a link to it. I can pull it up for everybody.
Okay, you got
So,
okay, yeah. I haven't
where's the
responded to her response to me, but I
or
did add
you could share
or
here
pull
it
up the
is.
HL7 ticket to the
Yeah.
JIRA 2 that she mentions.
Is it this one? No.
No, it was the procedure. If it's unread, you might be able to click on it and then go to the it's from Carmela.
Is it old?
No,
Older?
it's
Mhm.
this week. It's new. I don't know if is it maybe under the new tab on the top, the three on the left. There, the procedure concepts.
Did she actually define what she meant by procedure? Because that, like you questioned her, that was my first question when I read this.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, it says it depends on what you mean by that, and then I gave some lab examples. But if you go further down, she responded.
Here, let me just catch up on you.
Yeah, there, the hi Andrea at the bottom of the screen. So the content logical definition for the value set in US core procedure codes includes expression include all of like. So it's basically this content logical definition for the value set.
Oh, okay. Let me chime in on this one because this needs to get constrained down.
Well, I think that's
Um,
the case. And then Ricky at her on Carmela's first post, she had a Jira, which has more of the, I guess, HTML7 background is why she's asking about this. So she's like, the value set should not include all LOINC concepts. Um,
Correct, it shouldn't. But I understand. So VSAC added, I helped develop, and I don't know
okay.
if it's released to the public yet, building an intentional value set from Loink. We set it up as a filter-based intentional definition. I don't know if that's been released to the public yet or not, but that was in design last year. Um, so we can filter based on the class type as well as the order obs flag and then
Okay.
the six axes.
So
So she should be able to build an intentional link value set that would essentially include ordered only orderable procedures based on those three items. Um, but she should only be doing class type lab and clinical. She should not be using class type claims attachment and what's the other one?
yeah,
Yeah,
you're talking about the type equals 1, 2, and 3, and 4 from LOINC.
correct.
Okay,
Yep.
because the class is separate, so that would be another.
Mm-hmm.
But I look forward to you chiming in on this because this
Yeah, I
gets
don't.
into the question of what is a procedure, and when you
Right.
look
I
at
don't know that
U.S.
we want lab to
We
be
don't
part
want
of this.
Loink. I don't think for any of
Oh,
it. And she's asking to kind of exclude Loink. That's her Jira. And I would tend to agree with her because in US CDI, when it lists a procedure, it's the SNOMED procedure hierarchy, which we do want. Now, what gets kind of interesting, and I'm glad you're chiming in on it, is are they considered radiology procedures? Because so here's the rub. In SNOMED, there's the procedure hierarchy, which includes lab orders. And
hmm.
I recognize the UK and Australia use that for their lab orders. However, in the US, we use LOINC, not the procedure hierarchy, and lab orders are not really considered procedures, although some people might get confused and you think that they are. In fact, Epic, and I put an example in from Epic, their DSTU version for Fire In their FHIR interface, they consider lab orders as procedures. So they have a complete blood count
Hmm.
mapped to the SNOMED procedure hierarchy because it's available in
Hmm.
their FHIR interface that they had set out. They don't have the example in R4, so I'm hoping that they fixed it. I don't know 100% if they do. I know for a lot of pathology surgical procedure related tests, Epic still is using them if they're collected by a surgical procedure, they're considering those orders as procedures. And so they're not
Hmm.
necessarily going to use LOINC, they're going to use SNOMED. And this is part of this whole confusion on what is a procedure. And it's going to create inoperability challenges in the US, is my concern. Um, I guess
Yeah, and
overall,
this is for US core, so it should be specific to the US. It should,
correct,
yeah.
correct. Um, so I would agree kind of that LOINC should not be used unless anyone knows of any procedure where the term wouldn't be in the SNOMED procedure hierarchy, I guess, is because that's what's listed for US core, not LOINC, or in US CDI for procedure. LOINC isn't listed. And so I don't think we should conflate the two. And I think a lot of people are based on these various notions and understandings of what a procedure is. And that's why I asked Carmela, like, how are you defining a procedure?
Oh, this is going to give me a headache.
It
Um,
sorry.
well, no, because it all falls under CPOE. And so people just assume when they say procedure, because that's what you order, that it's meaning CPOE. Um,
But Loink is listed here. So from it,
I,
just from a logical perspective of this is US core trying to represent the US CDI element procedure, they should not have Loink in there because Loink is not listed on this thing. That would be
well, hold on. Stan added 1,000 concepts to Loink in version 2.81
Uh-huh.
specifically for ordering to go into the procedure hierarchy in the
Uh-huh.
Loink ontology in SNOMED. So we've already crossed that boundary in either 2.80 or 2.81 of Loink.
no, but
So,
Loink, but I'm not saying Loink is international. Loink can do what they want to do. US
uh-huh.
core is trying to represent what US CDI says, and US CDI does not mention Loink.
We
So
don't
if
use
US
SNOMED.
core wants to represent US CDI procedure, they should remove Loink in their value set.
Yeah, and the other thing, John, you said something that's
Okay.
key. You said ordering. Procedures are used for ordering. There's a separate orders class, which I think Ricky can navigate to, where we start to delineate out separate orders. And in that case,
That's a
originally
fair point.
that
Yep.
there's a procedure order there, and then
Hmm.
there's lab order, and under the lab order you do list LOINC because that's what should be used there for orders. So I agree on that point. It's
Okay. Yeah.
so
Yep.
you can see how the confusion is, like, is a procedure an order or not? Now, here's the other rub. This is in draft 5 where it came out. This is not yet required. So if you're trying to represent orders that are currently in use in our EHRs, you're probably going to model them under procedure. And that's probably why Epic did that with DSTU2
Mm-hmm.
before these later classes were added to USCDI and these delineations and definitions were added. However, we haven't switched to where 5 is required yet. So they're probably trying to do in older versions use procedure. Are we confused yet?
Oh, we're very confused, but that's okay.
Yeah, we're at the top of the
It-
hour too.
Oh,
yeah.
So
almost.
I will,
Yeah.
Saved by
I
the bell.
will,
Okay.
I will add the links to these things into the notes, finish those off. I'll probably put a note on the ticket, the JIRA ticket, and leave the Loink community forum out of it because from an international perspective, I think that discussion is still important
Hmm.
and should still be happening. But from the US CDI ticket specific perspective, they just need to get Loink out of there because it's not even listed in US CDI, not even the draft version 7. So as a choice. So
Yep.
they should
Okay,
not
Andrea,
represent Loink in that.
I'll weigh in on that
On the
Loink
Loink
forum
forum piece,
post.
yeah. Mhm.
I'll
Yeah,
email you
I
so you can
will.
continue to make sure we got everything all kind of.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Thanks, gang.
Thanks, guys.
Bye all.
Talk to you guys next week.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Bye.